Hello everyone, welcome to day 2 of ExileCon 2023. My name is Octavian and I am joined by a handful of very talented and interesting individuals who are here to handle your questions. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, everybody.
Yeah, so my name's Jonathan Rogers. I'm one of the game directors of PoE 2.
I'm Mark Roberts, one of the other game directors on part of
the other game director.
No, the other.
I'm Rishi. I'm one of the game designers on PoE 2.
I'm Rory Rackham. I'm the lead game designer working on player skills for PoE 2.
And I'm Octavian, I already said that. In a few moments now, we are going to have a QR code appearing behind me. If you want to get some questions into the panel, all you have to do is scan that QR code, and it will lead you to a website that you can submit questions from. It's pretty self-explanatory. We do have a few questions already. Let's start with one that's gotten quite a lot of attention since it was announced, is the topic of gold. Will gold become the de facto player currency for trading?
So definitely, at least no, but not because we're putting any restrictions on it. It's still tradable between players, but it'll be like trading in like Scrolls of Wisdom or something, right? Like you're just not going to do it because it's like, well, you know, there's much bigger currency that's worth more that you can do trading in. So yeah, it's kind of just not really something that not something I believe will happen really at Endgame anyway.
Okay, cool. The next question here, with 9 active skill gems, what considerations are being taken for players who might prefer a simpler playstyle? Something like, you know, your RFs and such.
There's definitely an opportunity for a player to have a simpler playstyle. There will still be focus on filling out those skill gems to an extent. You'll have spirit reservations and things like that, and you'll probably invest more heavily in the spirit on a build that's like that, so that's something you can focus on if you do want to focus more on a single skill. You will be missing out on the opportunity for more damage potentially, but it gives you more opportunity to think about what the best is.
I had a conversation with a designer a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, oh yeah, you know, I just want to be able to attack with 1 or 2 skills. I'll just use this skill and that skill. And okay, but like, you know, if you just added, you know, like armor break here, then you'd be able to do like the X more damage. And oh yeah, well, you know, I guess I'll just add that too, you know, just to get the extra damage boost. And then I'm like, oh, you know, actually, like you could add like this skill, you get a bit more damage again if you combat it with this. And then they're like, oh, you know what? I guess I'd add that too. I might as well just to my build, just because, you know, like, and pretty soon. You've walked them through the steps of getting to all 9, and he's got a whole build there. And it's like, you know, basically people, if you balance it right, then people will want to do more things just naturally, and it won't feel like a thing that they don't want to do, because like they'll just realize pretty soon that, oh yeah, it's fun if I use this also, and it's fun if I use that also. And I think it's also worth mentioning that you don't have to be using all 9 skills all the time. Like it is absolutely intentional. Like the reason we're giving you so many 6 links is so you can have situationally dependent skills that you just use occasionally, just when the situation is there. So like that's something we want, right? Like we don't necessarily want you to be using all 9 skills every minute. It's like, you know, yeah, you use them sometimes.
Yeah, different skills for different situations, but in that situation you might be spamming that skill. And there's also the trigger skills and other mechanics that let you automate skills that later in the game, once your character is really advanced, you might find ways to simplify your combat interactions, but then you might also find ways to make them much more complicated with other tools.
So it's still PoE, you can still very much make your own game of it.
Like all the cast on stuff takes a skill slot, right? Like every cast on whatever that you're using is gonna require one. I mean, I believe you can have multiple cast on like active skills in a cast on shock, for example.
Oh, yes.
So you can still trigger more, but of course you're reducing the number of support gems that you can attach in that case, because you're making that trade-off. So yeah, anyway, that's the deal with that.
And for a meta gem like a totem or barrier invocation, you can put a whole sequence on them and it will cycle through them, and
which is very fun, by the way.
You'll get a combo within your automated or your...
Yeah, so you can actually, the order of the gems in the item actually determines the order that the totem will cast the things. And I believe we also, although I don't know if they're actually in right now, the sequencing meta gems. Do we have those in?
No, they're not functional yet.
Right, they're not functional at the moment. Okay, yeah, so there's another one which is interesting, which is that you can put, there's a sequencing meta gem you can use to put multiple active gems in an order, and then when you use the skill, the character will cast them one at a time. So there are actually like various things like that are still in there. It's just, you know, that's...
One thing that came up there was situations to use different skills, and we are putting in a lot. We're creating more situations where you will consider to use more skills or to change your build for those situations. So something you might have seen in the demos is that a number of monsters are highly resistant to things. Normally monsters have a resistance, and it can be quite small. We have them going up to, like, you'll find a number of monsters that are 75% resistant to an element, but most monsters in the game aren't resistant to anything. And often there are also monsters that are vulnerable to different elements. So now one thing you can do to get around this is we're adding a lot more penetration to the tree, which means if you don't want to have to use the 2 skills, you can spec into penetration, use the 1 damage type. However, penetration does not go into the negatives. It will be bottomed out at 0.
So there's opportunity cost if you're going to do that, like
Yes.
you're making the decision to do that sort of stuff. But in general as well, like just with regard to monster design stuff, like we're trying to make everything less flat. Like monsters will very much have strengths and weaknesses that are much more prominent than they were in PoE 1. So that kind of thing, like that just makes everything more situational, as Mark was saying.
Yeah, I mean, talking about weaknesses, like Mark mentioned, there's resistances in monsters, but there are also vulnerabilities. So you can adjust your build to take advantage of something.
We just didn't want it to just be single target and AoE, and those are your 2 distinctions. We wanted to have more situations that you're adapting to than just that.
But it's also not just those plus resistances either. That's like also like the group size and just like the general. Like there should be many, many different things, like many factors that that can make a skill good, because that's really what differentiates between different skills. Like when would I use one? It's like so the more of that we can add, the more sort of interest you have between different skills and when they're good and when they're bad.
All right, so the next question people want to know the answer to, will we see a divergence in trade philosophy between the now split games, PoE 1 and 2?
I don't know that we would really, we still believe in the trade philosophy we have, so I don't really see that changing particularly. There have been some discussions about things we could do to ease things, to make things a bit easier, but honestly those would be more like quality of life things, and I don't see any reason why PoE 1 wouldn't get them also. That's kind of like a, I guess those like trade philosophy things are not something that's really in the scope of the split, right? Those are sort of things that would be the same for regardless of which game it is.
All right. At what point in the development of PoE 2 did you realize the game was too different and needed to be separate from PoE 1? Or was it like sort of a gradual thing?
So to me, it was right after the Act 2 reveal. Like soon after that, there was just kind of this we were making a huge amount of design changes. We were kind of doing a lot of things that, I was really keen to experiment with all sorts of changes. I mean, all things like dodge rolls and stuff. I mean, it's all there's so much of that stuff there where it's as we started to sort of design that stuff, we're like, okay, well, what would, as PoE, it's not even going to really feel that same way. People who have been here and they've been playing the demo, you probably noticed, it just has such a different feel. And we're kind of like, well, why take away the thing that we have that's that people like? There might be, I would hope that everyone will love PoE 2 more, but there might be some people who don't and whatever. And then you also look at things like WoW Classic and stuff like that, and you're like, there are certain people who want to go back and play that old stuff, and it's and that was, we were looking at that. But it's also this kind of thing of we have this thing going. We were probably going to be destroying too much as we made that transition in terms of people's items and things like that. It's things that they know, and we're just there's no real reason to get rid of that stuff. We can actually just do both. Why not have it all?
All right. So this one might be for you, Rishi, I think. How will we roll maps in PoE 2 without scours and chaos orbs? Or chaos orbs exist, but they work differently now.
Yep.
Is the mapping system changing fundamentally so that rolling might not be necessary?
Well, there will still be, itemized maps in some extent, and they will still be rolling.
But more than some extent, it's just they're itemized maps.
Yes,
it's still
exist.
And it might just be harder to roll your maps with things, and you might just have to deal with mods that you might have otherwise wanted to just not run, and now you just...
we definitely reevaluate what mods are on maps.
Of course, yeah.
All right. Here's one for Mark, most likely. How many new monsters explode into spikes?
And I ran out of time in my monsters talk. I had some of this. The spikers still exist, but what are they called? Porcupine Goliaths, eh?
Yeah.
Internal name Spiker. So they still exist, but they, in PoE 2, most monsters' projectiles actually use a ballistic system now where they actually adhere to gravity. So the off-screening is almost entirely gone. Projectiles will fall and hit the ground. So if you're far away, you're not going to get hit by them. The other thing is, I'm pretty sure that exact same monster, I don't think it's in the demo, but it is in Act 2, they die and then they have a animation where they vibrate and then the spikes fire out. So no just instantly killing them to then instantly dying. We're trying very, very hard to have minimal off-screening, zero off-screening, and zero situation where you just instantaneously die to something you did. But, I mean, if it happens on accident, is probably the reality, but we obviously try very hard not to make that happen.
They are small projectiles as well, so dodge roll will let you
true.
avoid them entirely.
They are
Always dodge
projectiles, so
right.
dodge roll will avoid them.
I can confirm they are in Act 2, as he says, but they are much more, like, actually dodgeable. We've been shown how PoE 2 will fix plenty of fundamental issues that Path of Exile has, feel of melee, mana reservation, tons of things. Do we have any plans to backport some of these changes to the first game?
That's a pretty interesting question. I think, like, the thing is, a lot of the stuff that we're doing there, like, was what facilitated the need to split the games in the first place. So it's like, I guess everyone's going to have their list of, like, I wish they just had PoE 1 but with this extra change in it or whatever, but I guess they all kind of come as a package because the balance of the game kind of like is balanced with all the stuff in mind. So it is pretty hard to sort of split some of those changes because, I mean, what would it do, you know, for some of the stuff, what would it do if you, putting Spirit back in PoE 1, like, it changes there's a lot of sort of things around that. It's not quite easy to just, like, put that in and that's the thing, you know?
Yeah. Like the caster changes to the caster weapons, bringing them back would mean destroying everyone's existing caster items because, well, they'll no longer have attack.
There's quite a lot of complexity
and
around that
everything,
stuff.
So.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, but fair. Is there any intention to, actually I know the answer to this one, but I'll ask it. Is there any intention to upgrade PoE 1 to the new engine that PoE 2 will be using? If so, if not, what does this mean for PoE 1 going forward?
Yep, so the engines are shared, and the reason that has to happen just as a technical matter is that since the microtransactions are compatible across both, and the VFX team need to be able to make them for both games at the same time, that means that we need to have the engine be shared. So we actually recently deployed an engine patch, which had a lot of PoE 2 changes in it. There's still like a few issues with it that are being sorted out, but that's sort of happening, and we'll continue to upgrade the PoE 1 engine. So it means that, like, new content for PoE 1, we'll be able to just use all those new features and that'll work just fine. Obviously the main thing though is that all the PoE content is not authored with the engine features in mind, like that's to say the old content. So like that means that like all the new stuff we're doing with shaders and everything. I mean, it's not just going to make all the old stuff look good necessarily, but basically new stuff can look good. And there's the other problem we've had in PoE 1 as well with regard to PoE 2 asset commingling, which has already been happening a bit with some league stuff. Is that it kind of makes the PoE 1 stuff look worse by comparison, which is a bit of a problem. So you have to be a little bit careful there as well.
All right, next question here. Will there be a Scion class later down the line in PoE 2? People have noticed that wasn't there.
No, we've removed it.
Scion is removed entirely.
And
yes.
why
Big
is
hole
that?
in the passive tree.
Yes.
We realized pretty early on that everyone else had a really distinct theme. We had twice as many classes with all these mechanics to spread out, and the Scion didn't have something that she could focus on specifically in PoE 2. We wanted to spread all that energy elsewhere. There'll probably be more mechanics that let you be a little more diverse, and we wanted it so you can travel further across the tree to do more build combining stuff that the Scion was the one enabling in the first place.
Right. It also just makes the tree more interesting to not have the center path like that. So we made it so there's less nodes required, at least that's my understanding, to go around. But there's without that center path, it kind of makes it a little bit more difficult for someone on the opposite side of the tree to go across. So it just kind of makes that whole Skilgrimage thing just a bit more interesting, at least in my opinion.
All right, next question here. Rishi, you might have the answer to this one. Will things like fossils and essences continue to exist in PoE 2, or are all sources of crafting being overhauled entirely?
Well, they will all exist because we still like the fact that there are ways to craft your gear in like these really interesting ways. But we will be changing how most of these function in some way, shape, or form, which we'll be getting to.
I think a lot of it is just that, so the philosophy that I have for the crafting stuff is like, I like that we have got a ton of systems, but the problem is that when they all work on every item type or like things like that, it just means that things can get overcomplicated pretty quickly. So for each different crafting system, I'm pretty keen to sort of like pull it back a little bit, so it's like, well, maybe this crafting system works on your body armor or something like that, and this one is for weapons and that kind of stuff. Or that's one way of doing it, but there's also like, oh, this one only affects like this, like I don't have a lot of examples off the top of my head, but it's like, you try and sort of make it so that, like for a given type of item that you're making, there's kind of like some crafting systems that apply that you can think about for that item that you're trying to make, but the other ones you don't really have to worry about so much, so just kind of like paring it back a little bit. But there's certain things that still need to be across all item types to make it interesting, and we might also like reduce the number of options within a given crafting system, so it's like, rather than being like, oh, here's a crafting system with like 50 things, it's more like, well, here's a crafting system with 5 things, and that's that one.
Yes.
And then that way it's like, there's just less kind of overall mental baggage there for all that stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one has gotten quite a lot of upvotes. Can you please implement cast on dodge roll as a skill, Rory? Can we do that?
If it has a spirit cost, then we can balance around it. So that
It should be
seems-
possible.
That does sound pretty
I
cool.
don't see why not.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'll add it to my issue list. Sure.
Will Mageblood, Headhunter, and other iconic chase uniques all exist in PoE 2?
We cannot have a Path of Exile game without some of these iconic uniques existing. So they will still hopefully be recognizable, but they might have to have a few stats be different just as a result of the mechanics changing from game 1 to game 2. But I mean, can you imagine a Path of Exile game without, say, a Shabs or a Headhunter? You can't, right? Yeah. So those will definitely
They absolutely
exist.
have to be there, and ideally
They must be there.
Ideally, we like make them work mechanically as closely as possible to
Yes,
how they work
yes,
in PoE 1.
yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Are the permanent buffs that are gained from killing campaign area bosses, like the +10 spirit consumable and such, shared across characters, or do I have to hunt down all of these on any build I level?
Okay, well, sure. I mean, they're currently just specific to the character.
Yeah, they're specific.
Yeah, they're specific to the character. It's one of those things you have to do.
And those are usually bosses that are also directed to by main quests and with other rewards attached.
Oh, no, all the optional ones. The optional ones have them, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
tons of them do. In fact, that's the reason. The optional ones are the ones that have them more, because those are the ones that we want to kind of get you to, like, if you want to do them,
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. Let me see. In PoE 2, have we considered group play in a more diverse way than just Aurabot plus carry?
Want to grab that one, Mark?
I like my Aurabots.
We don't have to get rid of them.
Well, interesting. Just considering it now, just doing it live.
I mean, we have the scepter weapon type, or item type, as a thing
We
that
do,
is
yes.
almost
Well, that was
designed
just
for
the
Aurabots.
Aurabot item.
Yeah, it works for minions very well.
Yeah.
But it is an Aurabot item.
Yeah.
And it has aura-like stats on it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, yeah. But, yeah, can you do more active stuff, Mark?
I mean, I'm not sure how much more there is to it. I mean, one thing is that currently you certainly cannot have as many auras, but that isn't to say it will change. And I think that's just because we're not quite far enough along with determining that. We're still making a lot of skills, still making auras. I mean, we have some cool, new, interesting auras that certainly work differently than just buffing.
I think the other
Determining
thing as
whether or
well
not I
is that
should say what they are.
because Spirit is like combined with more things, like due to the cast triggers and so on. There's that trade-off between auras and other casts that kind of matter as well. So it kind of like it does like change the calculus a little bit around that stuff.
We also have some cool plans for Ascendancy classes that do support things that are
For sure.
outside the
for sure.
normal
Yeah,
playstyle.
yeah,
For sure.
Always. Yeah.
All right, next
Not
question.
not the best answer there, but I mean, it's what we got.
No, I mean, that's the nature of live questions. Will there be alternative methods to leveling new alternate characters once you've completed the campaign, or sticking with the philosophy of push through the campaign with every character?
Well, it's probably one of those things that I know people are going to want to hear, but unfortunately, like we still believe in the whole push through the campaign thing. It's just one of those things that, I don't think that maps will be nearly as meaningful without that campaign push first. And there's just kind of a lot of there's a. It's one of these philosophical things that I just have always had a bit of trouble with. I'm definitely personally a fan, but I mean, I'm interested to hear what your guys' opinions are on that.
I definitely like going through the campaign as well. So, I mean, I do agree.
Right.
I agree also.
Yeah.
I think ideally the campaign is a challenge that if your character needs to be able to make it through. If you can make it through the challenge, which should never be easy at any point for any one build, unless you've got some amazing items from your previous playthroughs, then that is the challenge you need to overcome to be able to handle maps in the first place.
Well, and usually when you go for your second character, your gear is so much better that you can rush through the campaign a lot faster too. What was the first one?
Hopefully you'll die a few times.
And I mean, it's also just worth mentioning that we don't like any form of cross-league progress at all. Like, that's very important that we don't have that. So yeah, that's kind of important even just from that perspective.
All right, cool. I don't know if we have an answer to this one yet, but it is a much requested question. Is Reflect in Path of Exile 2?
Mark? You're the Reflect hater, I think.
The map mods are still there. Whether or not you can re-roll them away, well, to be determined. What other forms of Reflect were there? There's some bosses that had skills that turned them on. Those are, none of the new bosses have Reflect, so those won't be there because we're not keeping any of those bosses. What other forms? I mean, the Reflect just mods on rares. I mean, are we talking about things like the mods the retaliation mods as we call them? All of the rare monster mods that do skills like that are going to be reworked and revisited. So as to whether or not there'll be something like it, maybe, but again, I'm never ever going to have that unfair, just you hit a mob and instantly kill yourself thing ever again. If people remember from way back when I used to play with people on stream a little bit more, and there were certainly circumstances. I remember people specifically called me out on it because I shot a lightning arrow off screen and had a Reflect pack of crabs and instantly died. And then people were like, oh, they only fixed it because he died. Yes, I certainly then went into work the next day and was like, this is just bullshit, we're changing this.
So you're not denying it then?
But, it's not because other people hadn't suffered, but it certainly gives me a lot more drive when it is directly pissing me off.
All right. Oh, actually, Rishi, you might know this one. Are there any significant changes coming to the crafting bench in PoE2?
So currently we don't have a crafting bench in PoE2 because the vendor has been completely reworked to sort of fill in your problems that you might have while leveling. And you get to do this by saving up your gold over a few levels and then buying, say, whatever it is you might be missing. Like, let's say you're missing some fire res. You go, you browse the vendor. There's probably some fire res in there, and that's how you would solve your problems that the crafting bench was solving through the campaign.
And so just to clarify, the actual change of the vendor there is that it rolls more magic and modified items more often.
Yes,
so
that's right.
The vendor doesn't just have a pile of white items for you to look through.
Yeah, exactly.
It is intended the vendor is far more powerful and something you actually do engage with. Whereas in PoE 1, it's very much in the history, it's been the check for 6 sockets every time you level and a few other bits and pieces, maybe very early and highly knowledgeable racing strategies, but outside of that, it's been mostly useless, and we want it to be way more impactful now.
All right. Will there be challenge leagues for both games, and will they be separate for both? Do I have to do 40-40 and 8 out of 8 twice for every 3 months?
We'd have to think about that one.
I actually don't know.
I haven't thought about the challenges.
I mean, it depends on how much of a completionist you are, I guess.
Yeah.
In PoE 1, the amount of consistent regen or other means of recovery means that enemies need to do huge bursts of damage to be able to kill you. Any changes to Leech or recovery coming to PoE 2 to combat that?
It's definitely something that we're letting be much more high cost to your character to have a high amount of regen. You should be able to feel like you can build a regenerative character, but it shouldn't be like, oh, everyone's getting 40% of their life per second, so we need to do at least 80% of their life per second as monster damage to be a real threat. So we're bringing the numbers down a bit so that you have more of a window to be worried after taking a big hit. And also flasks are slightly, they're rebalanced really, again, around boss fights as well to bring all that stuff to the point where the character has a window of being in big danger after taking a big hit, rather than having to instantly kill them with that big hit. There are still some one-shots, am I right, Mark?
I feel...
It's a really dodgeable attack that you should have avoided, maybe?
I feel like Leech discussion has been the biggest time-wasting topic in the office.
Yes.
Like, there were so many hours and hours and hours discussing Leech. Like, for some reason, it was just the hardest frickin' thing to get right. I feel like we've come up with like 5 different variants on what we wanted to do that have changed. So, honestly, I feel like we're probably going to have 5 more discussions about Leech that'll waste like days at a time again from now. So, yeah, I feel like it's definitely in flux still. Like, holy crap. That for some reason, Leech is just the hardest stat to get right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just...
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. We start with like, we have to make this simple, and then we design and we design and we design, and it gets more and more complicated. I'm like, no, god damn it, we have to go back and simplify it again. And like, it's just every single time. This is why it just spirals around in this cycle. Like, it's just, Leech is too complicated, but everything simple is also worse. Ugh, it's terrible.
Well, the last time we had this thing, I remember you was just like, I can't believe we're still talking about this, and we
Exactly. Like, yeah.
And I am being asked, just to reiterate, that the QR code for sending in questions is available to live attendees for ExileCon, but apologies to anyone watching live on Twitch or something, not available for that audience. But next question here, if it will load. Oh no. Well, we'll ad-lib a question then. The wells that were placed in various towns, what is the design philosophy, the reason behind the implementation of those over just having flasks refill automatically when you enter town?
It's just a feel thing. It just feels nice to have like a, you go back to town, you click on the well. It's really hard to answer beyond that. It really is just, it feels nice to do. It's a little bit of a mind change when you first try it, but after you've done it a couple of times, it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense. It just feels right.
Yay, the questions are back. Any word on a death recap?
It's not a feature I'm against, it's just a tricky thing to implement, and it's just never been a priority, but like, it's something that we might get to it one day, but yeah, it's not, kind of busy.
Hopefully in PoE 2 it's going to be a lot more clear what killed you, however, then again, just, look, I know how it is, sometimes you're just dead and you're like, okay, I died, I don't know what happened, and we want to make, the visual clarity of PoE 2 will certainly be a lot better, and hopefully it will result in just less randomly imploding.
Right.
All right. On the topic of Druid, we've seen some footage in the trailer of bear form, and it's been mentioned a few times, but are there any other wild forms that it can transform into?
Wolf and bear are the only ones that we've announced so far.
All right.
But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've got some tough
It's quite a lot of
things to
animation
convince
work for
people
each one, so.
Back to itemization. Do rares drop with good rolls now?
Well, we have looked at the mod pools of every single item and changed them. That includes what mods roll on what items, their weightings, a bunch of things. So I'm not going to say that, every single time you find a rare, it's just going to be a good one, but we have changed the mod pool such that they make, I suppose, a better sense for the new game.
That is useful to know, but I think maybe the question was driving at the well-rolled thing that Heist had at one point, where it was lucky rolls.
Those. Well, no, that would not be. No.
Okay.
But there is some stuff, well, maybe it's a little bit in the weeds, but there's some stuff to do with the way that rarity affects things that's a little bit more, it's probably a bit too complicated to get into, but rarity affects things a little bit differently than how it used to. And we're intending to use less quantity on things and use rarity instead, and therefore we had to make it so that rarity can, for example, make it so you get more high-tier currency rather than requiring quantity to get that. So basically, the intention is that rarity, more rarity should feel like you're getting more valuable stuff, and you don't have to use quantity to be able to get more currency, and that sort of thing. So there's just some changes around that are a bit more subtle too.
We've also removed the currency drop penalty on bosses, which I don't know if people know exists, but that was, if anyone has done, I've seen it posted before, of when you kill bosses you rarely get currency items, and now the best way to get high tier currency is from bosses.
Yes. Because of the rarity bonus thing and rarity affecting it. Yeah.
Nice.
Fun fact also about mods on items and how good they are, light radius now extends your mini-map reveal range as you run around.
I didn't expect applause for light radius. Cool. All right. We may not have a definitive answer to this, yes. In fact, I know we don't, but it's a much requested question. How long do you expect the PoE 2 campaign to take for an experienced Path of Exile player?
I honestly have no idea. Like,
I figured that would be the answer, but there were a lot of
when we
people.
finish it, I'll let you know. But yeah, like it'll be, well, yeah, I really don't know.
Oh, this is an interesting question. Is the intent to have a shared endgame story, or a shared story between the two games in general?
We were intending that before, and then now, I mean, okay, it's shared in the sense that it's still one coherent timeline, but it's the end game is now separate from PoE 1 and 2 story-wise, so therefore they'll have, yeah, separate stories for that.
Okay, cool. Are there any problem monster mechanics that exist in PoE 1 that you're just really happy to be able to get away from and splitting PoE 2 to a new game?
Well, it's a little bit subjective as to what mods annoy people the most. Not really. As I said, we haven't really completely revisited and revamped all the monster mods yet, so that will come up. But I'd say mostly I'm relatively happy with how a lot of the mods are now, but there will be new ones, there will be different ones. So no good answer on that one yet, just because we haven't really gotten around to doing it.
Yeah, I think currently in the demo we just have the same rare monster mods that we have in PoE 1, just because we haven't really fully.
We disabled a handful of them just because they were visually not up to the standard of the.
I mean, even some of the ones that are in there kind of aren't, but at least we disabled all the shit that was really broken.
Yeah.
But yeah, we still need to get to the rare mods for monsters.
All right. Any considerations for hand or wrist strain coming from things like opening div cards, crafting items, sorting your stash?
Sorry, what was the start of that?
Any considerations for improving the situation around hand and wrist strain in Path of Exile?
Wrist strain, okay.
So like opening 1,000 stack decks or spamming
well, I mean, there are certain
fusings.
things now that don't require, like for example, you don't have to do the like chromatic like grind anymore, or the fusing grind and things like that. Like those sort of things we've gotten away from the need to like to just like spam something like a huge number of times in order to get something mostly. Like I don't think there's much of that left anymore. So like that kind of stuff at least is gone. But yeah, like I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else in particular beyond those that would be needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, so just a lot of individual cases that have been
Right,
reduced.
there's a lot of individual cases, exactly. I mean, in general, we're trying to avoid the need for, like just I mean, the whole like spam a bunch of fusing thing is kind of fun, I guess, but it's kind of whatever.
Yeah.
People don't need to do it anymore.
All right. What's the plan around bringing League content that's already been released in PoE 1 through to PoE 2?
It's complicated. The answer is dependent on each league and the exact specifics of it. But ultimately, we don't want anything in the game that looks bad. So therefore, there has to be like an amount of work that has to go into each one to make it look good. It won't necessarily be exactly the same as it is in PoE 1, like each thing. Like we want like as much as possible for the stuff to be there, but it's going to require a lot of balance work and other stuff to happen. So yeah, there's just a lot to do there basically. But yeah, it's case by case.
Yeah.
As we do it as we port them over, so to speak, reintroduce them, modernize the art, like it's certainly going to be the case that at least from the monsters and bosses perspectives, we're going to give them a full fresh coat of paint while keeping what they were at heart.
Right.
And
it's also likely that not all of the league stuff will be in for the closed beta. Like there'll probably be quite a lot of it introduced during the closed beta period, just for time reasons.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Next question. Path of Exile 2 is still free to play, right?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Good. This is a fairly broad question, but it's gotten a lot of traction. Will PoE 2 be a lot slower than PoE 1?
Well, I mean, it's not the goal to make it slower, but ultimately we want to make it so that, like, fights with bosses are more engaging and fun and, like, that kind of thing. So it's just, like, really important. Like, it's likely that the 95th percentile of speed will be a bit slower, and that's just, once again, to make it actually so that things are, like, can actually make sense in boss fights and once again, be engaging. But, like, there's still kind of ridiculous shit. I mean, like, you know, we like our, like, you know, crazy trigger gems and, like, things that, you know, you saw the triple cast Unleash and all that sort of stuff. Like, there's just all that stuff sort of going on. So by endgame, it will definitely be, there's a lot of shit going on that you can do. But yes, it's not going to be quite the level of ridiculousness that PoE 1 does, I'm almost certain. We kind of, like, it's not entirely, like, 100% done, like how the balance is at endgame. There's still more for us to do there, and we'll be talking about that more later. But ultimately, like, yeah, it's more about, like, making it fun for us than a specific goal of retaining speed. So, you know, yeah, like, so long as it's fun, then we're doing a good job.
I mean, so far we've approved cast on dodge,
Yeah.
dodge roll.
Just now.
And I heard, and I know this is true, but it has been confirmed that we have passive points for speccing into dodge roll. So I mean, you can see how we get to somewhere where it can become fast and chaotic still.
I mean, we're always tempted to add stuff like that.
We can't help ourselves, yeah.
But it is certainly nice to not have to start the game from a point where bosses have to have 2-point-something billion life and all kinds of damage caps, and people are doing overflows, damage over time, and all of that stuff. So, but it's all relative. But nowadays, when we have to add a boss to PoE 1, like a pinnacle boss, it's pretty much like has some unquantifiable amount of life because of these things. But that is what we had to do because of where the numbers have gotten to. So bringing both scales down doesn't mean everything's much slower, but it certainly allows us to then have more room to add more pinnacle bosses with more life over another 10 years of content, right?
So we talked about leagues being ported forward into PoE 2. Is there any plan to port forward old bosses, like will Shaper be in PoE 2 in any capacity?
We'll see. Yeah, like we have to see what we.
There's room for it. We haven't decided exactly what to do with each of them at this point in time, but I mean, it would be great.
Yeah.
A lot of that is really awesome.
Okay, cool. I'd like to see it. Will loot filters still exist in PoE 2?
Yep. No reason to take them out.
Nice, excellent. Let me see. Oh, div cards, that's the whole question. Will div cards exist in PoE 2?
We still need to work that out. I mean, I want them there. Like, I think they're cool. Like, they never quite exactly did the
what we
exact
want them to-
thing what we
yeah.
want them to do. But like, I'm hoping we can get it so that they do. And I mean, they're fun. Like, it's a really cool. It's just a nice little thing. So I would certainly hope we have them.
All right. How will acquiring skill gems on subsequent characters work with there being no skill gem vendors? Do you just have to build up a stock of uncut gems to have ready for leveling a new
I
character?
mean, you'll probably have excess uncut gems, especially low-level ones. So it should be no issue to get.
Yeah, they're dropping in the place of skill gem drops, so you'll have them as you go through.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Rory, can the bear form dodge roll? I think we answered this.
Yes, the bear form can dodge roll. As expected, a bear is slightly slower to perform a full 360 rotation than a humanoid is. Does mean they have a larger period of the melee and projectile avoidance while they're doing the roll. Convenient. More fun to do like donuts as a bear because of the fact that you can change your direction quite easily.
It travels further as well.
Yeah, it travels further. So like it rolls
It's
at the same speed. But
same. It's always the same as your movement speed.
yeah, but because it goes longer, the time of the roll is But yeah, it looks pretty ridiculous.
And because the bear is larger, it can also push a lot of enemies out of the way while you're rolling. So full bowling ball experience.
The much harder question for our animators is what wolf dodge roll looks like.
Oh, yeah.
That went through a few iterations.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And you can actually, if you turn into a bear outside of town and then enter, you can be a bear in town who rolls, which is the best thing.
So cost on dodge roll with bear rolling. That's what.
Now we're talking.
See, it's still going to be PoE. Do all the new classes have 3 ascendancies?
Yes.
None shared between different class variants?
No.
Okay. How are you going to manage the fragmentation of the player base and resources with PoE 2 now being a separate game?
Well, I guess that's a little bit hard to answer, but effectively, we just do what we need to do. I mean, we've set up our incentives with the microtransactions to make sure that as a company, we need to dedicate resources to both games, and that's what we want to do. But effectively, like, there will be some content sharing, I'm sure, just not necessarily like, oh, we made this boss and here we put it in both games, but more like, hey, this model was useful. If we make a few changes, we can make something look different. I mean, we've already even been doing that. There's been stuff from PoE 2 that's come into PoE 1 already. You probably wouldn't even recognize it because, that's easy. This fundamental stuff you can then just change a little bit and then you're good. So there'll be stuff like that. But fundamentally, like we believe we can do it. There shouldn't be an issue. Just dedicating resources to both games, and we're set up such that we can.
Good to hear. Are vendor recipes still a thing?
Yep.
Yes.
Sure.
Excellent. How are minions going to be made into a more active playstyle than they already are, if that's even the plan?
It is definitely the plan. There'll be new tools that Minion characters have. We didn't want to focus on Minions for ExileCon because we wanted to spend a lot of time getting them just right, getting the good experience. There is going to be more of a focus on temporary Minions that you're constantly resummoning if that's how you're wanting to build your character. But also, the fact is that you can also have a large number of passive Minions thanks to the Spirit system and investment in them as well. There's some cool stuff we're doing as well, like Ray's Spectre is now more of a capture a corpse.
Yeah, it's the
and
Pokeball
stick
gem.
it in a gem.
So you capture a monster with it. Yeah, you get this thing, and then you capture a monster, and then that gem is now that monster forevermore. So then you can use it. It's really cool.
And you must gemify them all.
Yeah, you've got to gem them all.
A
Yeah,
true
something like
Minion
that.
master.
Someone's going to have a quad tab of every single thing. Oh, that is scary, though, because if there's a bug where you can gemify a boss, oh, God. Sorry, QA brain. Are there campaign differences for each character? I mean, I guess there's different like voice lines. Like Monk has a line for entering an area as opposed to
There's
Sorcerer.
different voices. I mean, so like the sort of most fundamental, like the only thing, I guess technically there's three things that are the things that you cannot have on the other characters. One of them is the three Ascendancies, one of them is the look of your fundamental base character model, and the other one is the voice lines being different. Everything else is like, you can get the items and you can make it work. So yeah, basically that's the thing. I mean, the gameplay one is obviously the Ascendancy classes. That's the big difference between the classes.
I do, and this is from someone who, it's not like lore's been my #1 priority starting from a player perspective, but I do enjoy it and I am into it. But seeing the characters and how they react verbally to the world has been real interesting. And so you have the sorceress who's of a Mariketh background, and then when she's in Act 2, she's commenting a lot more about what's going on, and it feels way more personal. And you're getting that like live storytelling as they're talking about it, and it makes you feel a lot more connected to your character than has been in PoE 1.
There's also just nice little touches, like we've got recorded specific voice lines for engaging specific monster types and things like that, and that's pretty cool. There's like how we sort of think like, how does this character feel about this type of monster and this kind of thing. So yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah, it's real cool.
I don't know who was captured in the gameplay demo, but the sorceress will shout at the robots and say, "Foul automaton."
Yeah, exactly.
She hates robots for some reason. Rory, is the passive tree as dense as it is in PoE 1?
Yes, we don't have masteries in the way that they are in PoE 1, but there is more passives in total, I believe, and maybe not if you cut out the Scion. I'll have to do the math, but there's a lot more going on in the passive tree in terms of different forms of things that you can customize your character with, focusing specifically on taking out enemies on low life and potentially putting them in that situation more easily. So there's more variety for what's on the tree, and because of that, there's more options for what you can be taking in any one character. We have far fewer, say, weapon-specific clusters. There's only one main cluster that is focused on axes, so you're focusing more on general melee mechanics, which also means that it's slightly more convenient with the weapon swap system as well.
Yep. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Are there any major archetypes, such as traps, brands, slams, etc., that are being done away with in PoE 2?
Brands, I think, are
Brands
are sort of merged with totems, really.
Yeah, I don't think any of the
mechanics.
it's really more of a merge.
I don't know if this means you can stick a totem on a monster yet, but that's what support gems are for,
I
right?
hope it means that.
We've kind of unified traps and mines.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
The way that works, I suppose you probably explained it in the item store.
Yeah.
Basically, like we've got a trap
It's just the
base
base type
and
that
then
determines
you can
whether it's a
choose-
trap or
So
a
then
mine.
any skill could be a trap or a mine, depending on the base type you're using.
But all your favorite trap or your favorite mine skills are probably going to exist if they can exist in PoE 2. Just now you choose whether they're a trap or a mine, right?
Okay. How will Ascendancies be unlocked in PoE 2?
Well, we haven't announced specifically the way, but we have in each of the first 3 acts. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. So for acts 2 to 4, there's a thing specific for that act that you will do for ascending, and we'll announce what those are later.
Cool.
It's not the labyrinth.
It's not the labyrinth.
Confirmed, at least not Labyrinth. What do utility flasks look like in PoE 2?
So utility flasks are generally going to be more reactive to things. Like, for example, the flask might say, you become immune to burning if you use it while you're burning, which is similar to some of the mods that appear on flasks. So that is what the utility flask itself is going to do. So it's no longer just flask piano. You have your buffs up kind of all the time. It's more of a when something happens to you, you then use the flask in response to that.
All right.
We also have effectively a guard flask.
Yes, yes.
Taking the place of guard skills in most ways. It's there as your emergency, I'm about to take a lot of damage button.
And I suppose that one is proactive, but it's like a short burst of like a shield where the guard flask absorbs a percentage of the damage that is happening to you. So you can use it as like a, oh shit, I'm standing in the slam, I shouldn't be. Press the flask. And
Yeah, it's not something you're going to want to be pianoing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If that was the concern. With the changes to caster weapons, will wanders still exist, like attack wand builds? And if so, in what form?
Some of the wand inherent skills
are
now
actually,
effectively
yes.
the wand skills. So, and there'll be ways, of course, because it's part of Exile, there'll be ways to focus on specifically your wand or your staff's spell and make that into your main damage spell somehow. There's always a way.
In those cases, though, have those skills been ported into being a spell themselves? Like a kinetic blast is now a spell on a wand, so it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you still get to do the.
Yeah, you still.
It's still kinetic blast. It's just a spell instead of an attack.
It's just that it deals spell damage in a sense. But
will it be any easier to respec your build during the campaign in PoE 2?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Will it be any easier to respec your build in the course of the campaign in PoE 2?
I mean, I don't think we haven't really thought too much about it. I'd say it's probably similar.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess at least with the skill gems, it's a bit easier to change those over due to the way that the uncut stuff works. But as far as like passive goes, it's probably fairly similar. Like we'll give you some respec points, from time to time, things like that.
You could always save some of your split passives to try out something, but then,
Sure.
then you need to respec them afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. This is the most upvoted question I've seen ever on this, is will there be fishing in PoE 2?
Well, is there even fishing in PoE 1?
Did you
I'm not at
get the
liberty to
memo?
say.
What? Wait, did you not hear?
No,
okay.
shit, yeah.
Don't worry about it.
What is fishing?
Yeah.
So we don't have, it must be a non-New Zealand thing.
I'll explain it to you backstage later. Since the sockets are now moving to the skill gems themselves, will we know the number of sockets an uncut gem will give us on the gem it's generating, or will we only see those after we've cut it?
So every gem gets 2 supports as a starting point, and then you use Jeweler's Orbs to increase it by 1. There's 3. There are specific, like it's a lesser and a normal and a greater Jewelers. I don't remember the exact names, but there's 3 tiers of Jewelers basically, and then that takes you from 2 up to 5 sockets, which is equivalent to a 6-link. So effectively, like that's. They don't drop with more, they don't need to. And you should have, it's likely that by the time you're getting later on, you'll probably have just a stack of the lesser Jeweler's Orbs so that you can increase it immediately as soon as you get it.
I can't recall if we've locked in whether they start with specific colours when you first cut them. Or if they did, you would see what they would be before you had cut
Yeah,
it.
yes.
Yeah.
But I believe it was locked in per skill. I believe that's what we had in the last discussion. But the thing is, they're easier to change now with the way that chromatics work. So that's just easy to do.
I think as it currently stands, it generates random colors, and I know that because I was very worried it was going to generate colors that I couldn't use in the demo.
But yeah, I believe that the intent is that it's a fixed per skill as a starting point, and then later on you can change it.
A lot of these are repeats. Are channeling skills like Divine Eye are coming to PoE 2?
Yes, we still have channeling skills. I mean, there's a few on the demo characters. A lot of them have a lot more specialness in them, that some have a minimum channeling time, some have more of a longer channeling time, but they also have the ability to change direction. You can always dodge roll out if you've made a mistake where you start it, and some have mobility built into them while you're channeling. Some special ones.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to play with a channeling skill in the demo, then pick the Warrior. He's got the supercharged slam.
Right.
Cover your Mason rocks. It's one of the best things to cover your Mason.
I will take your word for it. Are jewels still in the game? Basic up to more complicated flavors.
Yes, they are.
They are.
Is the Quicksilver flask still in the game?
No.
Okay.
It's controversial.
Die, Quicksilver.
We kind of touched on this earlier, but just to clarify, Magic Find in PoE2 will still be a thing, yes?
Of course.
Yes.
Because we talked about
Yeah,
rare
and
gold.
it'll be better than before. It'll help you find more currency now.
Yeah. And also more gold.
And also more gold.
So you can gamble more. What is the overall, that's a big question, but touch on it a bit. What is the overall design philosophy for mana costs and mana sustain in PoE2?
I mean, I guess it would be hard to quantify easily, but now that you have a mana pool, because you're not reserving all the mana, like it means we can actually have some design here in terms of like some skills costing more and some costing less and that kind of stuff. So, you know, like, yeah, that's just a thing now. But yeah, like obviously, like you need to be able to build your character such that you can sustain yourself. Like you're going to need to get some mana regen and nodes and things like that. But also, you know, like I would hope that mana flasks are a thing. You know, you can actually use to make sustain a thing. You know, there's things like that will happen. But I mean, once again, it's sort of hard to quantify. It really comes down to sort of just playing and finding out what feels right.
Rory, you have the answer to this one. How does charge generation work in PoE2, and are there any differences with charges, power, frenzy, endurance?
So charges no longer give inherent stat bonuses. They're there almost entirely as a thing to then spend on a very, very powerful effect. So the skills that were gaining charges, we started off with designing ones that were just every time you hit an enemy, gain a charge, but moved on to more of a design of when you see a situation open up where you can gain a charge, you should use the skill to gain a charge, to take advantage of the situation. And then you can unleash something incredibly devastating. The bonuses that skills that spend charges get are huge, and the support gems that cause the skill to consume charges will also give a huge damage bonus to that skill at the cost of preventing that skill being able to gain charges anymore. So while a skill is being used that spends charges, it can't gain charges, so you always have to be spending an effort to gain them rather than just expecting to be at full charges and being able to spend them at will. It's a real build-defining thing. An investment in charges is about you're focusing on the charge gainers and the charge spenders as part of your build.
Right. But it's not something we would expect every character to be engaging with necessarily. Yeah. It's just like some characters are going to be doing that kind of thing, others not.
If you don't enjoy the playstyle, the monk's all got quite a few skills about power charges, but he's got quite a lot of skills that aren't about power charges as well, if you just don't want to engage with that mechanic.
It's no longer like a checkbox you have to get on every character. Get frenzy charges, get power charges.
And
whatever.
a lot of the charge spenders as well are perfectly good skills if you never touch the charge mechanic as well. You can still use Falling Thunder for its AoE, and you can still use Flicker Strike to close in on enemies. In fact, Flicker Strike has no cooldown anymore, so if you somehow get crazy amounts of attack speed, then where there's a will, there's a way.
And we have time for one more question here, so let's make it a good one, if I can find one here. We'll end on a party play one. Are item drops in PoE2 instanced or shared with party members? I imagine it's the same method as PoE1?
Same as PoE1.
Yep. Though you should play free-for-all and steal things from each other. That was a quick one, so we actually do have time for one more. What system or item, this is a big one, were you most excited about being able to design into PoE2 that you couldn't fit into PoE1?
I've wanted to get Spirit in PoE1 for years, and then when I pitched it for Jonathan for PoE2, I was like, yes, it's finally, it's Spirit's time.
I mean, for me, it's just all about the melee combat improvements. I'm just like a huge fan of actually making sure the action combat feels good. So like, it's just all about those really fine details of just, like all the stuff around dodge cancel and like all of the, just like making sure you never lose control of your character and like the cancel windows for like different skills. Just all those really fine details. That's really kind of what makes me happy. I just want someone to be able to play our game like it. Just like if someone just like random person walks up and they start playing, they're like, oh yeah, this is a great action game, and then all the depth is just like an additional thing that they learn about later that gets them really into the game and becomes more of a thing later. But it's like your first impression of just like, this is a great action game. I just really want that to feel good. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all our time. Unless we've got any more comments you'd like to add, anyone?
I think for me, the most exciting thing was when we were able to add 6 more classes, because I've actually wanted a Druidic archetype in the game for a while, and we finally got to do.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's very cool.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the most exciting part for me.
And mine is definitely just being able to engage with monsters and bosses on a more meaningful level, which is part of that feel, even if I end up dying to them during very critical keynote presentations. That is what makes it satisfying, and that is what makes it enjoyable.
All right, well, thank you for joining me, gentlemen.
All right.
And we're going to head off.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.